very much for coming. Part of Inclusion Week, ending on a high, I'm hoping. So I'm Mick Ward. My day job in the council is I'm a Chief Officer for Transformation and Innovation in Adults and Health. But this is very much me in a personal capacity, and when I tell some of the stories, you'll understand why this is me in a personal capacity as one of the founders, initial members and activists in UP Leeds. But having said that, and you'll hear from some of the examples I'm going to give, some of it directly related to my work in the council, and I would suggest some of the learning from this is just equivalent now to anybody involved in equality work. So, AIDS active in Leeds in the 80s, and I'm going to be brave and attempt to start with a little old video. The sound's not very good, but it's only 35 seconds long. And it has got subtitles. You have to find it on YouTube. So what I'm about to show you is a government information film that was shown across all channels every night for about a month or so. So, oh come on. Just a minute, I have to stop. There's two running at once, that's why. I'll start again at the beginning. Right, let's start again. You see, technology. Right, I'll start again. Do play.
You got it on
right. So, crikey. I'm just trying to reduce this one now.
Escape.
Yeah, and I'm worried about the next thing coming up. Let me close that down, get back to pen. Okay, so that was quite a haunting thing to go into every household in the country for a period. One of the interesting things at the time that made us at least thought, at least we're doing something. So this is the first time the government had even recognised there was a crisis going on. Although you may have noticed the answer was look at a leaflet. It doesn't mention condoms at all, doesn't talk about the groups that are particularly affected, but hints. And of course for anybody who was already affected by HIV and AIDS, that whole nightmare scenario of the tomb and that doom thing was a terrible, terrible thing to have. And it was just an example of the state of the nation at the time and the level of crisis that was being faced. And I would suggest that there were three things going on at the same time: ignorance, lack of funding, and prejudice. So there was, and to some extent understandable, a lot of ignorance. This was something that was moving at a fair rate of speed. Having said that, the early signs of HIV and AIDS, for people who don't know the AIDS history, its original name was GRID, gay-related immune deficiency. And a lot of work had already been done in the States about it. But there was still huge, wide ignorance about what was going on. The second thing that was a major problem for those of us involved in this was a total lack of funding and action by the state, by the NHS, by local authorities, and to some extent by community groups themselves. And the third of which is the huge level of prejudice that was going on, both directly about anybody affected by HIV and AIDS, but particularly, of course, the gay community or anyone else seemed to be in one of those groups. I would argue very strongly, though, that the ignorance and the lack of funding and action was driven by prejudice. That is why there was no action being taken and why people continue to be ignorant. And I was trying to think of some of the ways to give people who weren't around at the time just a sense of what was going on. So I've just picked three things that all happened within a month or so at the same time in Leeds. Leeds University, Porter. Who remembers Gay Switchboard? Is people old enough to remember Gay Switchboard? good couple of people. So Gay Switchboard, advice for LGBT communities. People use the word gay much more generically there. It used an office in the student union at Leeds University. The porters in Leeds University organised and refused to unlock that door because they refused to touch the key because the key had been touched by gay men. And they took that as a policy and refused to do that, and Gay Switchboard had to move for a period of time. They refused to touch a key because a gay man had touched it. The same week, there was a stabbing incident in North Leeds off Street Lane, and there was a rumour that the person who had been stabbed was gay. So the ambulance crew arrived in full gowns, masks, helmets, the whole thing. And to some extent, you could almost understand that. Bloodborne disease, they're doing the blood, you do have to be careful. However, what the council then did was fence off the entire area, and an hour and a half later turn up with a flamethrower and burnt the entire grass verges for 300 yards either side of where the stabbing had taken place because of the fear in the community. And of course all this was going on during the time of Clause 28, which became Section 28, which was of course the law passed by the Tory government in May 88 that stated that a local authority shall not intentionally promote homosexuality or publish material with the intention of promoting homosexuality or the promoting the teaching in any maintained school the acceptability of homosexuality as a pretended family relationship. So you have to remember the AIDS crisis was going on at a time when this was the law. And I think sometimes when you hear things about Clause 28, Section 28, you think about the sort of evil Tory government. For those of you within it, I'm talking from a personal perspective. Sitting over there in Whitehall, but of course this was directed at local authorities, and local authorities took action on this, even in Leeds, the great council in Leeds. So at the time I worked for social services, as I've always done, and I managed a service called Armley Resource Centre. It was a resource centre for young disabled people, so people from the age of 18 to 25. It worked alongside a number of other services. Osmond Thorpe Resource Centre is still going. The ethos of Osmond Thorpe was very strongly focused on peer support and group work. So we had a men's group, a women's group, but we also had drama groups, we had a poetry group, we had an artist group, we had physical activity groups and all sorts of things. But not surprisingly, because of the people we were working with, once a year we would put on a little course around sexual health and well-being. Young disabled people, particularly in that time, many had been to special schools, very little knowledge of that. And what happened, because of Clause 28, I was approached by my manager and just gently advised to drop the course, because of course the course included information around lesbian and gay relationships. And I think it's interesting that in terms of how bad policies work in places like councils, because I was just advised, it'd be for your own good. You know, we don't really need to do that, you know. Not surprisingly, if anyone's been around in social services and knows Armley Resource Centre, we ignored that advice and carried on with the course. At which point, I was written to by the Assistant Director of Social Services, Keith Murray, who became the Director, who directly instructed me to either end the course or, and I quote from the letter, if at all possible, it would perhaps be sensible for heterosexual staff to give this advice. So that's put in a letter from Social Services Directorate to a member of staff. We decided to ignore that instruction and carry on with the course, at which point we were then threatened with legal action, and the council's legal department came up with this fantastic idea. If a social worker was overtly homosexual or known to be a professed homosexual, they ought to consider carefully whether they should be giving advice that referred clients to gay agencies. I think the idea of anything even remotely like that now would just blow people's brains, but that was the position that local authorities were put into. Not surprising, it being Armley Resource Centre, we still carried on. There were two things that I think helped us win that argument. The main one, and I might come back to this later, was the trade unions. We were all members of the trade union at Armley Resource Centre, and we say if you take any action against anybody involved in this, we're going on strike. It's as simple as that. But what we also did, and this is where the thinking of ACT UP starts to come in, we did a fake advert because we had a job vacancy coming out, and we leaked the advert before we put it in. Because in one of the arguments we've been saying, well, if the course, which was like a 12-session course, had a couple of sessions on lesbian and gay sexuality, but the other sessions were mostly about straight sexuality, presumably the straight sexuality, from the same logic, would have to bring in gay people to deliver that course. So we did an entire fake advert asking for lesbian and gay people to come in to teach straight people how to have sex. We also did an advert using the phrases overtly homosexual preferred. We were never going to quite pull that out, but we sort of leaked as if we were. And, you know, the council kind of just looked the other way and we carried on with the course. But that is a reminder, it's not always about direct stuff, it's about being lent on and where you're prepared to go. So that just gives you the sense of what was going on, not just in Leeds, but obviously worldwide and in the country. So a number of us started thinking, what is your response then at an incredible crisis? And I can't underestimate, as well as the prejudice, the level of crisis. Our friends were dying, and friends becoming ill. You know, people individually in Leeds, a number of people appearing in these photos all died within quite a short period of time. This was something that needed urgent response from the community for something different to happen. So one of the early things I think you need to do is start to develop alternatives. So some key people start to look at what did we need to do. And the first thing we did was we established Leeds AIDS Advice. It was entirely a group of volunteers, people interested in the area, some people with medical knowledge, some people involved in wider health things, who just came together and started to think, where can we get good information? Where can we give information out? Can we act as formal advocates? Can we set up peer support groups and so on? And that was entirely voluntary led. Eventually we started to grow that, and of course it became the organisation that many people know. We had one post. Eventually, after a couple of years, we did get a grant through public health in the council, who'd always been very supportive. That was a guy called Ray Gaston, and we had that one worker. We were so excited having one worker, and we operated out of a porter cabin just where Millennium Square was. And then nationally, MESMAC was created, and Leeds was successful in getting the money to fund MESMAC. And this young boy came and applied for this job called Tom Doyle. He didn't get the first job, which he keeps on reminding me about. We gave the first job to somebody else, but we fairly quickly got a second post, and Tom Doyle was the original project worker for MESMAC. And of course we did, even though we were sort of setting about try and influence the statutory sector to work with the NHS to start thinking what they could do. And like I say, there's a guy called Martin Schweiger, who's the equivalent of Ian Cameron, who's Director of Public Health, who did do a lot of work and start to set up meetings. And we actually used the equality team in the local authority to have a bit of a focus on some work in this area. Second thing we tried to do is try and use that political influence, but you've already seen you're dealing with the Tory government. And I think it's fair to say, with apart from a few people in the council, there was largely indifference around the issue. We did have a couple of councillors, some of which are still about, who were supportive, but getting that across the rest of the council was quite difficult. So what we started to do was build alliances with other groups, and again the trade unions were really, really important. But of course the crisis was accelerating at a fast rate, so we very urgently recognised that we need to do something much faster than some of this is going to do, and that's about the birth of ACT UP. So ACT UP, the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, it's an American acronym, there you go. But it's nice, vibrant, doing work. So that was established in New York in '87, but at which part of the crisis in New York was huge. For famous getting together in speech by Larry Kramer, which formed the group, very, very focused on action. And it spread relatively quickly through '98 up to the 90s. So most major European cities, Paris, Berlin, etc. Leeds was actually one of the first, London and Leeds shortly afterwards. Manchester was one of the very first to establish an ACT UP. And different ACT UPs came about in different ways. In Leeds, what happened was it was coming together of some LGBT activists, and that was a mixture of people who'd been around for some time, involved in things like Gay Liberation Front, etc. A number of women who'd been involved in the strong, very strong women's movement we had in Leeds, some lesbians involved in that. But crucially as well, a number of people who came at it from a strong political activist role, and that was certainly my past. I'm an old Trotskyite, trade union, and my direct action work had been involved in a lot of direct anti-racist action. So I and some friends came from a very strong thing of you deal with some of this on the streets. And as a result of that, ACT UP in Leeds always had a very strong equality focus. That sounds really obvious, but some ACT UPs were, for instance, really focused on the idea of individualism, particularly in America. Ones like ACT UP Golden Gate was entirely focused on treatment issues. ACT UP Philadelphia, interestingly, they're probably the best at intersectionality and so on. Leeds was very strong on that focus. But I think the main thing about thinking about how ACT UP worked was always core was about action and direct action. What you didn't get in ACT UP meetings was tons and tons of debate about definitions. I don't think we ever had any terms of reference. I don't think we ever went, oh, this is for us. If somebody had an idea and was passionate and get a few people around them to gather it, then we did something. I don't know if you've ever seen any films of ACT UP meetings. There was a really clever thing that you didn't clap any speakers because that wasted time, right? And you just get a little ripple that what you were saying was heading in the right direction. You weren't allowed to do big speeches, you weren't allowed to do political stuff. It's all around action. So we would work alongside those existing groups like Aid Advice, and in fact I ended up being the chair of Aid Advice at the same time, and trade unions, but we were about targeted, high profile, direct action, which was often not lawful. It was about civil disobedience, and I'll give you some of those examples as I go through it. Some possibly go too far for me to show in a public film meeting. But we were always very clear, what's the target? Be really specific about the target. Have some very clear demands about what you're doing. Although they be swift and so on, we try and plan them really well. I've had to put in mostly because we had some disasters, and I might share some of those at the end about, oh yeah, we didn't think that one through. Generally short. I think sometimes when you're doing play action and you're having a long sitting can be useful. We generally like short. Get in there, make a thing, get the press involved, blah, 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 end it. One of my criticism now of somebody who's still involved in political stuff, people don't know how to end things. You know, saying, yeah, we've had 6 speeches. Oh, we know things are bad. And the number of times I've stood outside those bloody steps, outside the art gallery, you know, going, can we end it now? Yeah, we've done that. But crucially, visual. We were so this is, you have to remember, pre-social media, but make it visual. Make sure you got in the news, make sure you got in the papers, and be really, really bold. And that was important for us because we were not big. I think our height, we probably had 12, 14 core members in Leeds. We could call them more than that, but it was never some huge group. It was a group of people incredibly committed to this. So I'm going to share some of those examples, the targets and the actions. This is the one I got a photo of, sadly. It was one of my first ones. It just showed the cleverness. So Virginia Bottomley was the health minister at the time, and so clearly a target for us because she had done very little, apart from authorise that terrible campaign. We discovered she was speaking in Manchester, so we got hold of some friends in Manchester and managed to get tickets into the event she was speaking at. So we all dressed up fairly smart. And as she got to speak, we all silently stood up and walked onto the stage. Probably more difficult to do that now. But I think one of the reasons we were allowed to do, we'd taken in a bit of flip chart and you just had one letter on it. And as we walked up, it spelled Virginia Bottomley. And we just stood up in front of her with the sign Virginia Bottomley. And then at account, we rehearsed this a lot of 4 seconds. We all went like this. It was like Folie Bergère, it was perfect, and reformed. Virginia Bottomley is an anagram of I'm an evil Tory bigot. At which point the entire thing just collapsed in laughter and we walked off. No rest, that was it. And that really began to think about the impact you could have with something fairly swift. Some of the targets. Texaco, a well-known company. Texaco made it a requirement if you worked for them in order to take advantage of their health scheme that you had an HIV test, whether you wanted to have one or not. Sod counselling, it was a requirement. So we decided to have quite a long campaign against Texaco. I think the probably more obvious one is we picketed Texaco garages for a long period of time, at various points of times of day. You know, this rush hour is always a good one. What we also did though, we did a really nice thing, is we got one of our people who worked in design to replicate all the Texaco fonts, and in the early hours of the morning we would go to Texaco garages and do out of order on every single one of their little things, or sometimes just leave one, so they just got these mad things. In terms of one example of things maybe you don't always think it through, we, with some other actors, targeted Texaco headquarters in Canary Wharf, beautiful big building, and the plan was burst into the building. It's got an incredible beautiful foyer, lots of echoing, chant chant chant. They asked us to leave, we refused, they called the police, there's 15 minutes negotiation, please come, throw you out, you get a good photo op. That's how that works, we were quite used to that. We went into the headquarters, we were there 22 seconds when their own security staff arrived. We didn't know they had their own security staff. Grabbed and threw them out. While they were throwing me out, it was a beautiful shiny floor, they dragged me, literally, my trousers started to come off because they hadn't got out. Which is not a good look for when you're on the press. So I did trip up another security guard around just to slow him down, at which point he stomped on my head. So I got covered in blood, like ear, teeth, the whole thing. However, he had his security badge name on, so we collared that. So we got thrown out, but it was good press, it was fine. However, security badge. Within 45 minutes, we were on the Texaco internal phone system, being passed from HR to wages, and by 3 o'clock that afternoon, we had his national insurance number, his bank account number, and his personal details, which we took some action on later in the week. Armley Prison. So prisons were a big issue, as you can imagine, around HIV and AIDS. I've got one of the flyers here in your packs. What, no condoms? That one. So I had a demonstration outside Armley Prison, just about raising the profile. So I got a photo of this. It was a really short one. Apparently the police don't like you doing demonstrations outside prisons. They particularly don't like it if the demonstration involved blowing up balloons with helium, attaching packets of condoms to them, floating them over the prison, and then trying to shoot them down. I don't think we managed to do any of it, but it looked quite nice. They'd go off and then they'd just go, or they wouldn't float off. But it was quite a nice thing. And again, you know, 6 of us, I think, were there early one morning doing that. Please turn up, you get a good photo opportunity. And it starts to make a thing, and then the demand is we want to meet with the prison governor and have that bit of debate. But unless you took that action in the first place, I don't think we'd have ever had the meeting. Leeds Dental Hospital, you would have thought things like the NHS would be okay. Leeds Dental Hospital, before you went in for treatment, produced a questionnaire that you have to fill in, which basically only had to tick it in is if you'd ever had sex with a man, ever, if you'd been to Africa. There was no thinking about what happens if you say yes to any of those. There was no other issues about other communities. So we had a little picket there. We did like to dress up in ACT UP. We liked a little thing. So this is sort of recognising moles. For people who are interested in the history of Leeds, you will see Jill Porter in quite a few of these. These are my personal photos. That little handsome face in the back is Tom Doyle. That's good old Tom. That's Carl Gallagher of Zemansky Solicitors, although as of this week, of Carl Gallagher's Solicitors. He was always our legal advisor. Jude Boyles, who worked for a long time at the Crisis Centre in Leeds. So I always liked a visual pub, something that I just got there. And again, on the back of that, we got to have meetings with the director of the dental hospital and got them to change their thinking about how they use that questionnaire. Youth Hostel Association, the lovely Youth Hostel Association. They banned HIV positive people from going to the Youth Hostel Association. So at the time, the Youth Hostel Association had a shop in town, a bit like sort of Blacks and Greenock, selling camping equipment. So that was a nice simple one. We occupied that one, but what we did is we got everybody to get into sleeping bags and zip themselves up. So when the police came to eject us, it got a whole nightmare because they were trying to work out whether we were going to run off with the sleeping bags and get done for them. We go, no, we don't want them. So that was a really nice one. They issued a High Court injunction against us, against doing further activities. We had to find innovative ways of doing that. But again, they eventually pulled back on that policy. Good old friend at DSS, our beautiful building down the road. This was a real good example, I think I've got a flyer for that there, about making links. Because clearly what was going on in terms of some of the decisions around DSS and benefits around people with HIV and AIDS, had similar impact on disabled people, particularly people with fluctuating conditions. And I know we're in a very, very similar position now, but again, the government at the time, not surprised, is doing cuts to benefits. So we had a demonstration outside the DSS headquarters. But again, I think the difference in sort of thinking of ACT UP is, yes, we did the demonstration outside, but then somebody quite cleverly, somebody with those sort of contacts and a nice suit, set up a fake meeting in the DSS at the same time. So got into the building for his meeting, at which point somehow the fire alarm went off, and therefore we could then occupy the building as the doors opened to get everybody out. So we then occupied the DSS building along with a whole range of disabled people to again make that much bigger point, get on the telly, get the press for it. And then Leeds Hospital Fund, which I think was probably one of the longest and most virulent campaigns we had. So Leeds Hospital Fund, probably nowadays you'd know it's Simply Health. The Leeds Hospital is very successful. Thousands of people in Leeds were members of it, including many, many people in the council. When you started working in the council, you were giving a Leeds Hospital Fund flyer. It was taken automatically off your wages. And it was basically, you know, additional money if you needed spectacles or teeth work, or you're off sick for a long time, or for funeral expenses. They refused to pay out for a young man in Leeds who died of AIDS. Because he died of AIDS, a guy called Neil Greatorix, he's quite a young man, and his mum contacted us initially about this. It always was a very emotional thing. They wouldn't pay out on AIDS, even though they paid out on other long-term conditions, because it was self-inflicted. That was their thinking about it. So that became a very long campaign and quite good. So it ranged from, this is a little symbol on it, a spanner in the works. One of the things we did was just trying to screw up how they work. So we'd have phone campaigns of ringing up every 3 minutes and so on. Well, this was quite a nice one. We just made a really black spanner on an A4 bit of paper. And then what we do during the day is we'd sneak into random offices in town in the days of fax machines. And we would just use these various offices. It's really easy to walk into an office. Their fax machines and just fax this to Leeds Hospital Fund. It took an hour to get through a fax machine and just clogged up their system, used up all the ink, etc. We of course occupied their offices. Quick tip for anybody involved in campaigns: when you're arrested, try and get on the ground. Don't hop. Don't look good. Hop in. That's taking a screenshot of the tile. Pathetic on it. So we did a number of things, but the things that really changed it, one of which is we set up a fake company and then registered with Leeds Hospital Fund for using their service, which gave us access to their AGM, so massively disrupted it. And then where the council did come in, the Lord Mayor was the chair of the board. He resigned from that. And then the real win was we got a motion passed through NALGO, precursor to Unison, that suggested that we would stop the automatic taking off of money to the hospital fund through wages, and we got a friendly councillor to put a similar motion on through the council, which never had to go that way. That was enough to make them panic, but that took a year and a half of really aggressive campaigning, doors being locked, super glue, disrupting their meetings all the time for that to happen, a number of arrests. And of course, as I said at the start, it was also about linking in. And of course, as we approach World AIDS Day again on the 1st of December, that was always a big thing for us. But I think it's fair to say, although we supported the annual vigil, there was always a vigil outside the town hall, candlelit vigil. Really important to remember those people who died. What we wanted to do was to focus on the action. So we shifted from supporting the vigil to actually getting on the streets. And this is from probably a bit later on when we managed to go one of the very biggest demos around HIV and AIDS that we'd seen in the UK. And you have to go back, as I was saying at the start of this, about the context of this, about what people thought about AIDS and HIV. So to have a people campaign about it, walking down the hedgerow, was really key. But prior to that, one of our very first ones, we did it in Dortmund Square. And what we did was gathered in Dortmund Square and then thought, die-in, which was the thing, die-ins were a big thing in ACT UP. So you lay down on the ground, you stop the traffic, causes total mayhem. People go around your body, so you get little bodies on the thing, and that stays for a couple of days. Quite a good visual, which a die-in was a bit of a standard action for us. So we did one in Dortmund Square. It was really successful. It's like, I think it was probably the start of Christmas shopping time. So we were quite impressed. Although there was one guy who was on video, got off the bus, and he was in his right state, and he said, oh, I'm on the way to gym with my wife's just had a baby. So we gave him a tenner for a taxi, which is maybe not the best way to properly plan and organise, but he did look very distressed. Anyway, at the end of that, and we said, oh God, this is the best turnout we've had, because, 12 of us, but there was about 30 people. Okay, say something. So I stood up on the little bench in Dortmund Square and just said, we're UP Leeds, And I sort of see the corner of this floor, and it's a phalanx of police officers charging in. So they grab me, throw me back in the police station, and then there's a bit of kerfuffle and some bagging, and then somebody else gets arrested for trying to get me out, and he gets thrown in, taken off to the police station. This resulted in another demo. So I arrived down at Millgarth, and the first question they asked me is, have you got AIDS? Not surprisingly, I refused to answer that. Have you got HIV? I refused to answer that. So every single person, a police officer on the floor, put on masks and rubber gloves while I was there for 2.5 hours to move me, even those who never came near me. So literally, they moved me around a cell like that, and when they took me out booking, they were all still wearing gloves and rubber masks. So what we did next week was the rubber glove demo. So we had a demo outside Millgarth, but what we did is we brought 300 pairs of marigolds. So we got everybody on the demo to wear rubber gloves and keep your gloves off our bodies, I believe the phrase in the chant was. So again, really pushed that. We actually took that through the Police Complaints Authority, got nowhere. But that's a reminder, don't get sucked into thinking you're going to do it like that. That had way more impact than trying to do anything through sort of the foul routes. And although what I'm really talking about here is about Leeds, clearly this is a worldwide crisis. I was lucky enough to spend time both with ACT UP San Francisco and New York at that time, but what really pulled those things together was the World AIDS Conference. And in 1992 it got moved at the last minute from the USA to Amsterdam. It got moved because the USA were refusing anybody with HIV to enter the country. I know it sounds unusual for the USA to have terrible immigration policies, as if that would ever happen again. So it was moved to Amsterdam, and then the year after was in Berlin, which made it a lot easier for us to get there. One of the key things about the World AIDS Conference for me, well, two things really. One of which is that really helped with that notion of intersectionality, beginning to understand and learn from what other ACT UPs were doing and learning. The second thing was the incredible knowledge and position and commitment of people with AIDS throughout this entire process. So I went to talks in the World AIDS Conference where the book speaker were disruptive, and then somebody from ACT UP would come and do a talk using slides, using their own blood, and would do their own treatment and would seize their own treatment, constantly trying to change things. For ACT UP Berlin, we produced an alternative strategy based on the idea that you bring key people together at a time of crisis. And I remember it was quite a few hundred pages, and we could afford to get it printed but not collated. So what we did was, I think it was like 78 pages. So each version had its own page in a room like this, and then 20 of us just spent 2 hours going like this, walking around the room, collating it, because we just didn't have enough money to do that. It was an incredibly powerful document, made a massive impact on world thinking. And I'm leaping a bit, but interestingly, where we are now, the leader of the Global AIDS Fund is a guy from ACT UP Manchester, and his partner Ian is the policy and HIV development worker. They two are probably, in terms of individuals, the people most responsible for the reduction of drug prices in Africa. Although you remember those things when you think you're involved in stuff, and then you meet people who are really involved. I remember speaking to Ian in Switzerland or somewhere, and we were out for a drink, and he said, no, I've got to go, I've got to write this speech for work tomorrow. And I'll go have another drink. We've all been there, haven't we? I've got to look for work tomorrow. And we all went, well, what's it for? And he went, well, it's for Nelson Mandela because he's opening the UN. And I went, yeah, you better go along. I'm not in that world. I may have occasionally dabbled for something for a councillor, but that's about it. And of course, that started for really to think about some of those key groups and who we should work with. And I think with hindsight, we probably should have done more of this in Leeds. So this is just one example. This is a demonstration we did with prostituted women, who are obviously another key group that get badly affected by HIV and AIDS. But again, what was happening at the time, instead of people getting good information, advice, free condoms, people tried to regulate it, and not in a good way. So we're always interested in where we can make those links and alliances. And of course, the big one for us, throughout the entire thing, particularly driven by activists in America, drug companies. So our core thing is, we did like a drug company conference. We were always blagging our way into drug company conferences and disrupting them. And most of the reason for that was the drug company's slowness in doing trials, in trying anything new. It wasn't an area they saw huge amounts of money in, while the numbers were small, while that the groups were being affected weren't high profile. They tended to keep on trying to tweak existing medicines rather than do new things. They restricted access who could be on trials. So we pushed that all the time. We'd also target, particularly when they were selling, I don't know if you've ever been to conferences and things sponsored by drug companies, you get a lot of freebies, but they're always saying, so that this is me attacking Astra. I think we pretty much demolished them. They were particularly virulent in terms of what they were doing. And of course, the astronomical profits that drug companies make, which could have been ploughed into proper research. Drug companies still spend more money on advertising than they do on research, and weren't prepared to do that. This is when we did at a big drug company event, where somehow we'd photocopied £1 million. We were determined to get a lot more paper, more paper than you think, and we basically stormed this thing, throwing out the money, and then we did checks, pointing them out, and then had a big fire outside just to remind people about that huge waste of money. And drug companies still to this day continue to be a key target for ACT UP. So last couple of things, certainly in terms of some of the lessons, you really need the clarity about the nature of your group. Are you wanting to do alternative services because you need to do self-help? Is it about trying to influence and campaign, or is it direct action? I think, depending on what you're interested in, all three are equally valid. What I would argue very strongly, virtually any campaign on equality, you need all three. Otherwise, you're going to get lost in one. I mean, it sounds obvious. Know your facts. You'll see nowadays on various campaigns, and you'll see stuff out on Facebook, and you think, is that really true? It isn't. It's a rumour that somebody's put out. And I always remember we had a meeting with the insurance companies, and we turned to this meeting, and we thought we knew a bit. Oh my God, they were there with all their entire data people with these files of paper about proving this, and we were out of our depth. Very, very bad meeting. Have really clear demands. Not just, do something good for people with AIDS. Be very clear. We want this policy changing. We want this form changing. That. Try and link the action to demand, because that works really, really well in the minds of the public and the press. And as I said, we didn't have big numbers. Profile can be as important as numbers. Yeah, it's great to have a demo of 300-400 people, but if all you're doing, and I do it every year, is walking down the route around Leeds, and it barely gets a mention, it barely gets difference, that compared to 12 people doing some of that really gets public attention is really critical. And use people's individual skills and strengths. We didn't set out an ACT UP and think, oh well, we're going to do this campaign because we found somebody go, oh I'm a designer, I can design some really good flyers. Oh, I know how to get into offices really well. I know how to set up meetings. Really make use of that. And don't chase the funding. So many groups get obsessed with trying to get funding, and that includes chasing people like the council for funding. We never needed that. We were political director. We didn't want to be tainted by money from people who are doing it. Yeah, we'd have the odd benefit. Thank God for the Gang of Four and the Mekons. They were always our go-to. And we did have the days of benefits. What happened to benefit? Every Friday night there was a benefit for somewhere. But don't chase it. Particularly don't chase funding from your enemies. And really celebrate the wins. This is a tough world you're in once you get into this. So you have to really celebrate those successes. Share them out. And then just finally, of course it continues, ACT Up London has just been re-established in the last year. That's particularly over the fight for PrEP and PEP, but interestingly they're very quickly going globally and doing quite a lot of work around still the problem of the AIDS crisis in the third world. And of course it links incredibly, to go full circle, and to position a place like Leeds City Council to the cuts, because the cuts to public health funding will add to this crisis, the cuts to the NHS will add to this crisis, the cuts to third sector that's going on will add to this crisis. So that fight needs to continue. So that's it for me, but just to end with, of course, ACT Up, Fight Back, Fight AIDS. Thank you. I will take questions and comments, of course.
Where did you used to meet in Leeds?
Used to meet in a couple places. The main one was it the Fruit Cupboard it was called, or what was it called? No. So what was the little alternative cafe down by Cole Lane? The vegan cafe?
Fat Freddy's.
Fat Freddy's. Fat Freddy's. Good for meeting because the food never arrived. And it wasn't ever going to be the highlight of it. So Fat Freddy's. Fat Freddy's for more general planning, and then for getting detailed, this is what we're going to do, somebody's house.
Oh,
We're turning up at 4 in the morning, you need somebody's house for that, just in case. But hey, Fat Freddy's. The other thing that I would mention, what was really useful, I've got some examples here, and they are, we were discussing just the other day, all in the libraries, the importance of Leeds other paper. So obviously we were often aiming for the Yorkshire Post and the BBC. Leeds other paper just kept groups like that vibrant and alive. Is a great way to advertise stuff coming up, the classified, the reporting of the act. That's where I've still managed to find stuff out. Sad loss that we don't have anything like that anymore.